Hey there, friends. Get ready for a super fun story that's going to grab your attention and not let go. Picture this, it's a bright, sunny Saturday in a little place called Oakwood Hills. It's one of those neighborhoods where it feels like everyone knows everyone. The houses are neat, the grass is green, and kids ride their bikes down the street. Everything seems quiet and normal, or at least, that's what people thought. But something exciting was about to shake things up. Let me introduce you to Jake Carter. Jake was the new guy in town. He moved into the little house on the corner, the one with the big oak tree out front. To everyone in Oakwood Hills, Jake seemed like just a regular person. He didn't talk a lot. He liked to keep to himself. Most mornings, you'd hear this loud vroom vroom sound coming from his driveway. That was Jake starting up his shiny black motorcycle. It was so cool. The bike sparkled in the sun, and when he rode it, the engine roared like a lion. Kids would stop and stare, and grown ups would peek out their windows. Jake and his motorcycle were hard to miss. But here's the thing, nobody really knew much about Jake. He wasn't loud or bossy. He didn't go to the neighborhood picnics or chat with people over the fence. He'd just ride his bike, come home, and close his door. To most folks, he was just the motorcycle guy. Nothing special, right? Oh, they were so wrong. Jake had a secret, a big, juicy secret that nobody in Oakwood Hills saw coming. And trust me, when they found out, their jaws were going to drop. Now, let's talk about the HOA. Do you know what an HOA is? It stands for Homeowners Association. It's like a group of grown ups who make rules for the neighborhood. They decide things like how tall your grass can grow or what color you can paint your house. In Oakwood Hills, the HOA was a big deal. They loved their rules more than anything. They had meetings where they'd sit around a table, sip coffee, and talk about how to keep everything perfect. And the people in charge? They acted like bosses, telling everyone what to do. When Jake moved in, the HOA noticed him right away. They didn't like that he was so quiet. They didn't like that he didn't come to their meetings. And most of all, they didn't like his loud motorcycle. So, they decided Jake had to join their group. They started leaving little notes on his door. The notes said things like, "Join the HOA," or "We need to talk." Sometimes, they'd even knock on his door and wait for him to answer. But Jake? He didn't budge. He'd open the door, read the note, and just smile. "Thanks," he'd say, super polite, then close the door again. That drove the HOA nuts. The HOA people started giving Jake dirty looks whenever they saw him. If he rode his motorcycle down the street, they'd frown and whisper to each other. If he walked to his mailbox, they'd stare like he'd done something wrong. They wanted him to be like everyone else, to follow their rules and fit in. But Jake wasn't like that. He didn't care about their silly notes or grumpy faces. He just kept doing his own thing, riding his bike and living his life. And all the while, he was hiding something amazing. Here's where it gets good. The HOA thought Jake was just some random guy with a loud motorcycle. They had no idea who he really was. See, Jake wasn't just a regular person who liked bikes. Oh no, he was something way, way bigger. His secret was like a treasure chest waiting to be opened, and when it finally popped open, everyone in Oakwood Hills was going to be shocked. Can you imagine what it might be? Maybe he was a superhero in disguise. Or maybe he had a job so cool that it would make the HOA wish they'd been nicer. Whatever it was, Jake wasn't telling, not yet. Let's paint the picture a little more. Oakwood Hills was a sleepy place. The sun shone bright, birds chirped in the trees, and the streets were quiet except when Jake's motorcycle roared by. The houses all looked kind of the same, with tidy yards and white fences. People waved to each other and said hello every day. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. That's why Jake stood out so much. He was different, and the HOA didn't like different. They wanted everyone to be the same, to follow their rules and join their club. But Jake? He wasn't interested. Every morning, Jake would step outside, put on his helmet, and start his bike. The vroom would echo through the neighborhood, and heads would turn. Kids thought it was awesome. They'd run to the sidewalk and wave as he zoomed past. But the HOA? They'd shake their heads and mutter, "That bike's too loud," or "He doesn't belong here." They didn't know it yet, but Jake belonged more than they could ever guess. His secret was like a hidden key, and soon, it was going to unlock a big surprise. So, Let's stop for a second and think. What would you do if someone kept bugging you to join something you didn't want to? Imagine your neighbors leaving notes on your door, saying, "Come to our meeting," or "Follow our rules." Would you give in and do what they wanted? Or would you be like Jake, just smile, wave, and keep doing your own thing? It's a tough spot, right? Jake didn't let it bother him. He stayed calm and cool, even when the HOA got pushier and pushier. And that's what makes the story so exciting. He had something up his sleeve, and nobody saw it coming. Before we go on, I've got a little question for you. Have you ever had someone try to make you fit in when you didn't want to? Maybe at school, someone said, "You have to play this game," or "You should wear these clothes." How did it feel? Did you go along with it, or did you stand your ground? Drop your answer in the comments, I'd love to hear. Oh, and tell me where you're reading this from today. Are you at home? School? Somewhere else? Let's chat about it. Back to Jake. He was living his life, riding his bike, and ignoring the HOA silly notes. The neighborhood thought they had him figured out, just a quiet guy who liked motorcycles. But they were about to learn the truth. Jake's secret wasn't just a little thing. It was huge. It was the kind of secret that makes you go, "Whoa, no way." And when it came out, it was going to turn Oakwood Hills upside down. The HOA thought they were the bosses, but Jake? He was about to show them who was really in charge. So, stick with me, friends. This is just the beginning. We've got a burned motorcycle, some grumpy neighbors, and a secret that's going to blow your mind. What do you think Jake's hiding? Any guesses? The fun's just getting started, and I promise you won't want to miss what happens next. Okay, friends, let's dive back into our story. Things are about to get a little wild in Oakwood Hills. The HOA, the group of neighborhood rule makers, was not playing around anymore. They were serious, and they had their eyes on Jake Carter. Remember Jake? The quiet guy with the cool black motorcycle? Yep, he was in their sights, and they weren't happy with him at all. At the front of the HOA was a lady named Karen Walsh. She was the boss, the president of the group, and boy, did she love being in charge. Karen always carried a clipboard, like it was her best friend. She'd write down notes about everything: who forgot to mow their lawn, who painted their fence the wrong color, stuff like that. And her face? Oh, she had a frown so big and scary it could make a bear run away. Karen was not someone you wanted to mess with, or so she thought. Karen had one big problem: Jake. She didn't like that he wouldn't join the HOA. Every time she saw him, she'd march right up to his door, tap her foot like she was super annoyed, and say, "Jake, you have to join. It's for the good of the neighborhood." Her voice was loud and bossy, like she was telling him he'd broken some super important rule. But Jake? He didn't argue or yell back. He'd just look at her, nod his head a little, and say, "I'll think about it." Then he'd smile nice and polite and close his door. That was it. Can you believe how calm he was? But here's the thing, Jake's calm answer made Karen even madder. She didn't like that he wasn't scared of her. She didn't like that he didn't say, "Yes, Karen, I'll join right now." Nope, Jake just kept doing his own thing, and that drove her nuts. She'd stomp away, muttering to herself, her clipboard shaking in her hands. Karen was used to people listening to her, but Jake? He wasn't like everyone else. And she didn't know what to do about it. Now, let's talk about Jake's motorcycle. Oh boy, that bike was a big deal. It was shiny and black, and when Jake turned it on, it made this loud vroom vroom noise that you could hear all over the neighborhood. Kids loved it, they'd cheer when he rode by. But Karen? She hated it. She'd stand on her porch, arms crossed, staring at that motorcycle like it was her worst enemy. "It's too loud," she'd complain to anyone who'd listen. "It makes our neighborhood look bad." She'd scrunch up her nose and shake her head, like the sound of the bike was the worst thing she'd ever heard. Every day, when Jake parked his motorcycle in his driveway, Karen would glare at it. She'd stand there, watching it sit all shiny and quiet, and you could tell she was thinking hard about how to get rid of it. To her, that bike was trouble. It didn't fit with her perfect little neighborhood rules. She wanted everything neat and quiet, and Jake's loud, cool motorcycle was the opposite of that. It made her so mad she could hardly stand it. One day, Karen decided she'd had enough. She wrote a note, a mean one. She grabbed a piece of paper, scribbled some words on it, and marched over to Jake's house. The note said, "Join the HOA, or that bike's gone." Yep, she was threatening him. She stuck the note right on his door, taped it up tight, and walked away with a little smirk on her face. She thought, this will scare him. He'll have to listen now. Oh, Karen was so sure she'd win this time. But guess what Jake did? He came home, saw the note, and pulled it off the door. He read it, those big, bossy words staring back at him. And then, he laughed. Just a little chuckle, like it was the funniest thing he'd seen all day. He crumpled up the note, tossed it right into the trash can, and went inside his house. That was it. He didn't run to Karen and beg to join. He didn't get mad or yell. He just threw her note away like it was nothing. Can you imagine how that felt for Karen? She thought she was so tough, but Jake didn't care one bit. Karen didn't know it yet, but that was a big mistake on her part. She thought Jake was just some guy she could boss around. She thought he'd be easy to scare. But Jake wasn't scared. He wasn't even worried. See, Karen had no idea who she was really dealing with. Jake wasn't just the quiet guy with the motorcycle. He was hiding something huge, and Karen was about to find out the hard way. She thought she was the boss, but Jake? He was way more than she could handle. Picture this, it's a normal day in Oakwood Hills. The sun is shining, birds are singing, and everything seems peaceful. But there's this quiet fight brewing. On one side, you've got Karen with her clipboard and her rules, trying to make Jake do what she wants. On the other side, you've got Jake, calm and cool, not giving in. The HOA kept pushing him, leaving more notes, giving him more dirty looks. They'd whisper about him at their meetings, saying, "He's trouble," or "We'll make him join." But Jake just kept smiling, kept riding his bike, kept living his life. Karen started telling everyone her plan. "That motorcycle has to go," she'd say, her voice sharp and loud. "If he won't join, we'll make him sorry." The other HOA people nodded, thinking Karen was so smart. They didn't like Jake either. He was too different, too free. They wanted him to be like them, to follow their rules and fit in. But Jake didn't fit in, and he didn't want to. And that made the tension grow bigger and bigger, like a balloon about to pop. Every time Jake rode his motorcycle down the street, Karen's frown got deeper. Every time he waved at her instead of joining, she got angrier. The HOA thought they could control him, but they didn't know the truth. Jake wasn't just some guy they could push around. He had a secret, a big, amazing secret, and it was going to change everything. Karen thought she was winning, but she was walking right into a trap she didn't even see. So, what do you think, friends? Can you feel the fight building up? Karen's mad, Jake's calm, and something big is coming. What would you do if someone kept telling you what to do, even when you said no? Would you get mad? Would you ignore them like Jake? This story's heating up, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Stick around, because the fun's just beginning. Alright, friends, buckle up. Our story in Oakwood Hills is about to get even more exciting. Things were already tricky with Jake and the HOA, but now, oh boy, they're about to heat up literally. Let's jump in and see what happens next. So, it had been a week since Karen left that mean note on Jake's door. Remember that note? The one that said, "Join the HOA, or that bike's gone." Well, something wild happened. One afternoon, Jake came home after a ride. He pulled into his driveway, took off his helmet, and stopped dead in his tracks. His shiny black motorcycle, the one he loved so much, was on fire. Yep, you heard that right. Big, bright flames were eating up his bike, right there in front of his house. Smoke was puffing into the sky, and the air smelled like burning rubber. Someone had set it on fire. Neighbors started running over. Kids peeked from behind fences, and grown-ups whispered to each other. "What happened?" they asked. "Who did this?" A little crowd gathered around Jake's driveway, pointing at the burning bike. And who was standing there, watching it all? Karen Walsh, the HOA president. She had her arms crossed tight, and a big, smug smile on her face. She looked way too happy about this. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "Maybe now you'll listen, Jake." Her voice was sharp, like she'd won a big game. She thought this fire was going to scare Jake into doing what she wanted. But Jake? He didn't act like Karen expected. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even look scared. He just stood there, staring at the flames. His jaw was tight, like he was clenching his teeth hard. His eyes were sharp, like a hawk watching its prey. The fire crackled and popped, but Jake stayed quiet. Something was going on inside him, something big. You could almost feel it in the air. He wasn't just sad about his bike. Nope, he was thinking, planning, getting ready. What was he up to? Oh, we're going to find out soon. The crowd kept whispering. Poor Jake, some said. That bike was so cool. Others looked at Karen and shook their heads. They didn't say it out loud, but you could tell they thought she was behind this. Karen didn't care. She turned and walked away, her head held high, like she'd just taught Jake a lesson. She thought she'd won. She thought Jake would come running to her, begging to join the HOA now that his motorcycle was gone. Boy, was she wrong. The next day, the HOA had one of their big meetings. They sat around a table in the clubhouse, sipping coffee and talking about their rules. Karen stood up, grinning like she'd just gotten the best present ever. Jake's done for, she said, her voice full of pride. He'll join now, or he'll move out. That fire fixed him good. The other HOA people nodded and clapped. Great job, Karen, they said. You showed him. They all thought they'd beaten Jake. They pictured him packing his bags or knocking on their door, saying, okay, I'll join. They were so sure they'd won this fight. But while they were laughing and bragging, Jake was doing something else. Back at his house, he wasn't crying over his burned-up bike. Nope, he was on the phone. A quiet phone call. He stood in his kitchen, holding the phone to his ear, speaking in a low voice. Who was he calling? Someone important, that's all we know for now. His face was calm, but his eyes still had that sharp look. He wasn't just sitting there feeling sad. Oh no, Jake was making a plan, a big one. The fire didn't break him. It lit something inside him, and he was getting ready to strike back. Can you guess what he was planning? Hang on, because it's going to be awesome. Let's think about this for a second. That fire wasn't an accident. Someone had to light it, right? And Karen looked way too happy about it. She stood there, smirking, like she knew exactly what had happened. The neighbors noticed it too. They started talking more after she left. Did Karen do this? One lady whispered to her friend. She's been mad about that bike forever, a man said. Nobody had proof yet, but the clues were piling up. Karen hated Jake's motorcycle. She'd even warned him it would be gone if he didn't join. And now, there it was burning in his driveway. Pretty suspicious, don't you think? Jake didn't say anything to the crowd that day. He didn't point fingers or call Karen out. He just watched the fire die down until it was nothing but a pile of smoking metal. The firefighters came and put out the last little flames. They asked Jake questions, like, do you know who did this? Jake just shrugged and said, not yet. But that sharp look in his eyes? It told a different story. He wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to pack up and leave like Karen hoped. Nope, Jake was staying put and he was getting ready for something huge. Back at the HOA meeting, Karen kept talking. That motorcycle was a problem, she said. Now it's gone, and Jake will fall in line. She sounded so sure of herself. The others agreed, laughing like they'd pulled off the best trick ever. They didn't know Jake was on that phone call. They didn't know he wasn't giving up. They thought the fire was the end of the story, but it was just the beginning. Jake wasn't sitting still, he was moving, quietly, like a cat sneaking up on a mouse. The neighborhood was buzzing the next day. Kids rode their bikes past Jake's house, staring at the burned-up motorcycle. Grown UPS walked by, shaking their heads. What a shame, they said. But Jake? He wasn't out there moping. He was inside, working on his plan. That phone call he made, it was to someone who could help him. Someone with power. Someone who could turn this whole mess around. The HOA thought they'd scared him away, but they were so wrong. Jake was watching, waiting, and getting ready to show them all. So, what do you think, friends? Can you feel the excitement building? The motorcycle's gone, Karen's gloating, and Jake's plotting. What's he going to do next? Who did he call? The story's getting hotter, just like that fire. Stick with me, because we're heading towards something big, something that'll make your eyes pop wide open. Any guesses? Let me know what you think, and we'll find out together real soon. Alright, friends, this is it, the big moment you've been waiting for. Things in Oakwood Hills have been getting wild, and now it's Monday morning. The HOA is having their super important monthly meeting at the clubhouse. Picture a little building with a big table, some chairs, and a bunch of grown ups sitting around, talking about rules. Karen Walsh, the bossy HOA president, is right in the middle of it all. She's standing up, holding her trusty clipboard, giving her usual speech. We need more rules, she says. And don't forget the fines for breaking them. Her voice is loud, and she's pointing at everyone like she's the queen of the neighborhood. Everyone's listening or pretending to, because that's how it always goes. But then, something crazy happens. The door to the clubhouse swings open with a big whoosh. Everyone turns to look, and in walks Jake Carter. Yep, our Jake, the quiet guy with the burned-up motorcycle. But wait a second, this isn't the Jake they're used to seeing. Normally, he wears jeans and a cool leather jacket, looking like just a regular guy who loves his bike. Not today, though. Today, Jake looks totally different. He's wearing a crisp, clean uniform. It's dark blue, with shiny buttons and a badge that sparkles in the light. His boots are polished so bright you could see your face in them. Guess what? It's a state trooper uniform. That's right, Jake's a police officer, a real-life trooper who works for the state. The room goes super quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody moves. Nobody talks. Karen's mouth hangs open, and her clipboard slips right out of her hands. It falls to the floor with a loud clatter, bouncing a little before it stops. All eyes are on Jake. He steps forward, slow and calm, like he's not worried about a thing. His boots make a soft tap-tap on the floor. Then he stops, looks right at Karen, and says, "I think it's time we talked about my motorcycle." His voice is steady, not loud or mad, just strong. The crowd gasps all at once, like they can't believe what they're hearing. Whispers start flying around. What? No way. Did he just say that? Karen's face changes fast. First, it turns bright red, like she's embarrassed or mad. Then it goes super pale, like all the color drains out. She stares at Jake, her eyes big and wide. "Why, you're a trooper," she stammers. Her voice shakes, and she can hardly get the words out. She's not the bossy Karen anymore, she's scared. Jake just nods, cool as can be. "Yep," he says, simple and clear. Then he adds something that makes everyone freeze. "And burning someone's property? That's a crime." His words hang in the air, heavy and serious. The crowd gasps again, even louder this time. Karen takes a step back, like she wants to run away. Let's picture the scene, friends. The clubhouse is small, with white walls and a few windows letting in the morning sun. The HOA people are sitting in their chairs, dressed in their usual clothes, sweaters, button-up shirts, stuff like that. Karen's up front, or she was, until Jake walked in. Now she's just standing there, looking like she's seen a ghost. Jake's uniform is sharp and neat, with a big badge on his chest that says State Trooper. It's got his name on it, too, Jake Carter, in little gold letters. His hat is tucked under his arm, and his face is calm but strong. He doesn't need to shout to make everyone listen. Just being there, in that uniform, says it all. The HOA people start whispering to each other. "He's a trooper," one lady says, her eyes huge. "I thought he was just some guy," a man mutters. They're all shocked because they never saw this coming. Jake was always so quiet. He rode his motorcycle, kept to himself, and never bragged about anything. They thought he was nobody special. Boy, were they wrong. Karen's the most shocked of all. She's been bossing Jake around for weeks, leaving notes, giving him dirty looks, and now this? Her big plan to scare him with the fire just blew up in her face. Jake stands there, letting it sink in. He doesn't rush. He doesn't need to. The truth is out, and it's hitting everyone like a big wave. Karen tries to say something else. But I didn't," she stutters, but she can't finish. Her hands shake a little, and she looks around, hoping someone will help her. Nobody does. The other HOA people are too busy staring at Jake. They're starting to figure it out. Jake's not just a trooper, he's someone who can make real trouble for them. Burning his motorcycle wasn't just mean, it was against the law. And Jake knows it. Think about this, friends. All this time, Karen and the HOA thought they were in charge. They thought they could push Jake around, make him join their club, or chase him out of the neighborhood. They burned his bike to teach him a lesson. But now, the lesson's on them. Jake's not some random guy they can scare. He's a state trooper, a police officer with power. He's got rules on his side, and he's not afraid to use them. Karen's smug smile is gone. She's not the boss anymore. Jake is. The air in the clubhouse feels thick, like something big is about to happen. The crowd leans forward in their seats, waiting to see what Jake says next. Karen's still standing there, her clipboard on the floor, forgotten. She looks small now, not tall and bossy like before. Jake takes another step closer, his boots tapping again. I didn't want it to come to this, he says, his voice low but clear. But you didn't give me a choice. His words are simple, but they hit hard. Everyone knows he means business. Can you imagine how this feels? The HOA thought they'd won when Jake's bike went up in flames. Karen bragged about it, thinking she'd scared him into line. But Jake didn't run away. He didn't give up. He walked right into their meeting, wearing that uniform, and turned everything upside down. It's like a superhero showing his powers after hiding them for ages. The crowd can't stop whispering. He's been a trooper this whole time. Why didn't he tell us? They're amazed and a little scared, too. Karen's face says it all. She knows she's in big trouble. Burning someone's stuff isn't just a mean trick, it's a real crime, like Jake said. And as a trooper, he can do something about it. The HOA people start looking at each other, nervous. They cheered Karen on before, but now, they're not so sure. Jake's not just mad, he's ready to make things right. And he's got the law behind him. So, friends, what do you think? This is the big reveal. Jake's a state trooper, and Karen's plan just fell apart. Can you feel the shock? The excitement? What's going to happen next? Stick with me, because this story's not over yet. Justice is coming, and it's going to be awesome. Okay, friends, here's where everything gets wrapped up nice and neat. After Jake showed up in his state trooper uniform at the HOA meeting, things moved fast. The truth came out quicker than you can say oh. Turns out, Karen Walsh, the bossy HOA president, had done something really bad. She'd paid a kid in the neighborhood to set Jake's motorcycle on fire. Yep, she gave him some money and told him to light it up, thinking it would scare Jake into joining the HOA or leaving town. Big mistake. Jake wasn't alone anymore. His trooper buddies, other police officers, heard about what happened and came racing over to Oakwood Hills. Their police cars rolled in with lights flashing red and blue, and sirens going wee-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh. It was like a movie. The whole neighborhood ran outside to watch. Karen's little world where she thought she could boss everyone around fell apart super quick. She stood there, looking scared, as the troopers got out of their cars and walked toward the clubhouse. Karen tried to fix it. I'm sorry, Jake, she said, her voice all shaky. I didn't mean it. But Jake wasn't buying it. He shook his head and looked at her with those sharp eyes. You don't get to bully people and walk away, he said, calm but firm. He wasn't yelling, but everyone could tell he meant it. Karen had picked on him for weeks, leaving notes, burning his bike, and now it was time for her to face the music. The troopers didn't waste time. They walked right up to Karen, pulled out their shiny handcuffs, and snapped them on her wrists. Click, click. Her hands were stuck behind her back, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. The crowd, those HOA people and neighbors, watched with big eyes, too stunned to say a word. Karen, the lady who always acted so tough, was getting taken away by the police. They put her in the back of a police car, and off she went. Bye-bye, Karen. After that, the HOA people were super nervous. They didn't want Jake to be mad at them too. So, they ran up to him, all at once, begging. Please join us, Jake, they said. We'll change. No more mean rules. They promised to be nice and fair from now on. But Jake? He just smiled his quiet smile and said, I'll pass. He didn't need their club. He was happy just being himself. And guess what? He got a brand new motorcycle. This one was even shinier than the last, with a big, loud vroom vroom that echoed down the street. He rode it every day, proud as can be. The neighborhood learned their lesson. Nobody messed with Jake after that, not ever. They saw him ride by, waved hello, and left him alone. Karen was gone, the HOA stopped being so bossy, and Jake? He was the real winner. Justice was served, and it felt so good. So, friends, that's the end of this part. Karen got caught, Jake stayed strong, and everything worked out. What do you think? Pretty cool, right? Hey, friends. We've made it to the end of Jake's big adventure in Oakwood Hills, and wow, what a ride it was. Before we say goodbye to the story, let's sit back and think about what happened. There's something really cool here that we can all learn from, so let's talk about it together. Here's the thing about Jake, he was super quiet. He didn't talk a lot or brag about himself. He didn't get loud when Karen and the HOA tried to boss him around. He just stayed calm, riding his motorcycle and living his life. Some people might have thought he was weak because he didn't fight back right away. But guess what? Jake wasn't weak at all. He was strong, super strong inside and out. He waited for the perfect moment to show everyone who he really was. And when he did, boom! He turned everything upside down. Think about it. Karen and the HOA thought they could push Jake around. They left mean notes, stared at him funny, and even burned his motorcycle. They were so sure they'd win because Jake didn't seem like a big deal. But they were so wrong. Jake was a state trooper, a real police officer with a shiny badge and a big job. He didn't need to yell or act tough to prove it. He just waited, then walked in with his uniform and showed them all. Those people who thought they were better than him. They learned the hard way that Jake was the real boss all along. Sometimes, the person you least expect is the one who changes everything. Jake didn't look like a hero at first. He was just the quiet guy with a cool bike. But he had power inside him, power he kept secret until the right time. And when he used it, he made things fair again. Karen got caught, the HOA stopped being mean, and Jake got to ride a new motorcycle, happy and free. Isn't that awesome? It shows us that you don't have to be loud or pushy to be strong. Sometimes, being patient and smart is the best way to win. So, what do you think, friends? Have you ever met someone who surprised you like Jake did? Maybe there's a kid at school who's super quiet but turns out to be amazing at something like drawing or soccer. Or maybe it's a grown-up who doesn't say much but helps people when they need it most. I bet you've got a story like that. Tell me about it in the comments below, I'd love to hear. Oh, and let me know where you're reading this from today. Are you at home? Outside? Somewhere fun? Here's a little idea to take with you: don't judge people too fast. The quiet ones, the ones who don't show off, they might just surprise you. Like Jake, they could be hiding something amazing. And when they're ready, they'll shine bright and make things better. So be kind, wait and see, and maybe you'll find a hero where you least expect it. That's pretty cool, right? See you next time, friends. Keep being awesome.